It's official, Starfield has been released, and so in today's video I wanted to take the time to dive into something that a lot of people have been doing for years at this point, which is the comparison between Bethesda's newly released title and the reference in a space game theme, not genre because they aren't part of the same genre, but they do share the same theme, and that reference of course is Star Citizen. In this video, I will not tell you which game is the best because given their different nature, it will be the equivalent of comparing a goldfish and a guinea pig to figure out which pet is the best. It doesn't make any sense. However, when it comes to their specific features, I think that we'll be able to determine which ones are superior to the other, and so this is what we'll be focusing on. But first, I'd like to talk about this month's giveaway. Yes, giveaways are back, and this month I'm giving away a Drake Vulture for Star Citizen. You can enter automatically by becoming a Patreon or YouTube member. All the details are in my Discord channel. You'll find the link in the description down below. Or you can also get an entry for the lucky draw by subscribing and answering the question I will ask during the video. At the end of this month, I will pick up 10 comments that will join the lucky draw. Good luck to everyone. So, let's start this comparison by first talking about the graphics. And this is something that I've talked about in my recent first impression videos of Starfield. When I play Starfield, I have the feeling that I'm playing a game that was released 5 years ago, if I'm being nice. So clearly here the graphics are not always photorealistic. Sometimes they're a little bit clunky as well. That's not really the point of Starfield. The point is more narration, but that's definitely a field in which Star Citizen beats Starfield because Star Citizen really aims for the most realistic graphics possible and the most cutting-edge technology being implemented into the game, so clearly advantage Star Citizen. Next, we'll talk about the flight model, and once again, the flight model in Starfield is extremely basic. It kind of reminds me of the flight model in Freelancer back in 2003. It's basically a point and click with a few tweaks for your engines or your shields, but it's not really nearly as complicated as in Star Citizen. The buttons of your dashboard, well, you cannot interact with them as well. There's no transition from space to ground, no need to use your landing gear. You just click a button to automatically board or take off. So it's very basic indeed. So once again, Star Citizen has a much superior feature when it comes to the flight model. Next, let's talk gameplay. Now, what is gameplay? Gameplay is basically what you can do in the game. And here, I believe that Starfield is superior. You have so much to do in Starfield that is actually feature complete because the game has actually been released. You have a fully fledged exploration. You got mining, although mining is a bit more simpler than in Star Citizen. You've got, combat, delivery, trade, also all of that seems a bit simpler, but there's overall much more to do because it's more fleshed out and also accompanied by narration. So overall, I believe that gameplay is more interesting in Starfield than in Star Citizen as of now, because let's remember that Star Citizen is not a game that's finished yet. Okay, the next criterion I'm going to talk about here is more controversial. Some people are going to love it, some people hate it, some people will not really care. I am not here to judge here, this is just to relate to facts, but I want to talk about inclusivity. Yes, it's 2023, and in this modern day and age, at least in the Western countries, it's something that does count, and Starfield is a much more inclusive game than in Star Citizen. We already have seen all the memes about the pronouns, but it's not just that. You can have lots of different body types that you get to see around the Starfield universe. You get people who are overweight, slim, tall, short. You even have kids, something that's quite rare in these kind of games. Overall, I really enjoy seeing people from different culture and background as well. It's not every day that you have people from descending from Africa or that coming from France. Something that Star Citizen is definitely lacking. In Star Citizen, everybody sounds British or American, and for me, coming from Europe, it's something that's kind of a little bit boring, and that's definitely something that gets the advantage here in Starfield. Next, we'll talk about realism, and I think that Star Citizen feels more realistic than Starfield, unfortunately. While Starfield does feature a little bit of space magic, sort of speak, right, with these artifacts and the power that they gave. It's not really a spoiler. Anyone who's seen Starfield Direct know what we're talking about. We've seen a tiny bit of that. So yes, it's there. The graphics, as I said, don't look as photorealistic as in Star Citizen, and overall things seem a little bit more simplistic than what they are in Star Citizen. There's no real economy, there's no real people going by their business, NPCs spawn and despawn in front of you, which is again not really something that you would see in Star Citizen. So the feeling that what you are experiencing feels kind of more real is definitely in Star Citizen than in Starfield. After that, I would like to talk about the game Narration, and Starfield here is infinitely superior to Star Citizen. But again, it makes sense because Star Citizen is the multiplayer sandbox type of game versus the Narration is going to be more in Squadron 42. That being said, there just seems to be stories everywhere in Starfield. If I remember, there were over 220,000 lines recorded for Starfield, so that's really a lot of lines with a lot of different quests. There are even NPCs from procedurally generated stations that do speak to you and send you on quests as well. It's really filled with life, and narration plays a huge part of that, something that's truly lacking in Star Citizen, unfortunately. Next, we'll talk about the game universe, and once again, Starfield is superior to Star Citizen simply because, well, there really are 100 star systems in Starfield with planets that you can visit. Of course, a lot of these planets are barren, they are all procedurally generated, of course, but most of Star Citizen's planets will be procedurally generated as well, with a few handcrafted locations. That's also the same in Starfield too, but of course, there's definitely more content, more places to visit, more diverse worlds too, with also dynamic weather as well, and night and day cycles. All of that exists in Starfield as well, and overall I've been very happy with the different types of worlds so far. I'm 25 hours into the game. I'm really not bored with exploration. I'm always excited to get to discover new planets. They do feel, for most of them, quite unique and different, even though they may feel the same at first, and that's really something refreshing and wonderful to see. So advantage Starfield here. Next, we'll talk about the game art, which is kind of similar to the realism, I would say, but more when it comes to how locations have been created. And I did praise the game art of Starfield for making it look better than what it really is with its outdated graphics, but it's compensated by fantastic visualizations of cities, New Atlantis being one of those examples. But overall, I do think that game art is more impressive in Star Citizen. There is a deeper work here into making the world more believable in Star Citizen, and I'll give it here an advantage. Next, we'll talk about FPS Combat, and although I do enjoy FPS Combat thoroughly in Starfield, I have one little problem here, is that it is seriously hindered by your skills, and you do get bonuses and debuffs based on your skills or lack of skills, something that is not the case in Star Citizen. In Star Citizen, you are good because you practice playing the game. It's not an RPG, and that's why I think that combat in Star Citizen, for that matter, is far superior already, because it focuses more on that. Next, talking about the hero zones. The hero zones are basically the major landing zones, major cities. And there are not a lot of them in Starfield, in fact. We've got Neon, the Pleasure City. We've got, of course, Aquila City, the capital of the Freestar Collective, which is more like a little village, actually. New Atlantis is not very big either. Sidonia and Mars, and that's basically it. It's quite lacking, I would say. That's maybe the one thing in Starfield when it comes to the game world that I think is not very realistic, is that you would think that 300 years in the future there will be much larger cities, but no, that's not really the case. In Star Citizen, you have an entire planet that's a city, right? And even the other landing zones like Horizon or Lowville, when you go there, you are just in awe. It's just, there's this breathtaking element that Starfield does have a little bit in some places like New Atlantis, but that's about it. It's definitely something more impressive in Star Citizen than in Starfield. Next, let's talk about props and interactions with the game world. Although in Star Citizen we can interact with pretty much anything in the cockpit, which is much appreciated, a lot of the props are just non-functional, versus in Starfield, pretty much you can interact with anything, cups, chairs, things that you can open in drawers and close them. Star Citizen is starting to get towards that direction, but it's really getting slow, and it doesn't seem to be the focus right now as they're trying to finish Squadron 42. But even in Squadron 42, we don't know if we'll be able to do all of that. It's not something that we've seen in a lot of videos. There hasn't been a lot of videos anyway, but still, in the few videos that we've seen, it's not something that they've been focusing on. And it seems like Squadron 42 or Star Citizen are more focusing on the combat itself, the simulation itself, rather than the small detail that might be more important in a role-playing game, which is why when it comes to props and interactions, I think that Starfield here offers a better experience. Next, we'll talk about multiplayer. Obviously, Starfield is not a multiplayer game, so if you want to be playing with other people, Star Citizen is going to be your go-to game. We can't rule out that there's going to be eventually a co-op mode. There's been co-op mode for Starfield and also Fallout 4, so there's no reason why this can't happen for Starfield, but it's not something that's available right now. Finally, the last criteria here is the game finished. Starfield is finished. Star Citizen is not. So that's also something worth considering. Star Citizen is not as polished as Starfield is. Star Citizen is lacking features versus Starfield is coming up with pretty much all of the features that you would expect for this kind of game. So that's also why, well, here we're going to give the advantage to Starfield. It's just finished. Star Citizen is not. But in the end, guys, it doesn't mean that one game is better than another. The purpose of this video is really to compare the features between the different games and also the state of these features. Eventually, what's going to define whether or not a game is better than another is how much fun you are having with this game, but of course, fun is not something that we can gauge. Simply because, well, everybody's going to have their own definition of fun. So there we have it, guys, the ultimate Starfield versus Star Citizen comparison. In the end, I think that what makes how much fun you're having when you're playing so far is, I think, maybe the narration. I think that's really important, at least for me, right? It really gets me more involved in the game, even if technically a game is not the best there is out there. I think that a good narration always makes me excited to know what's next. But what about you guys? And this is the giveaway question here. What makes you have fun in the game? I'd like to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Once again, a huge thank you to the Patreon and people who support me via the YouTube membership program. I wouldn't be able to make this video without them. Check out my Twitch channel as well, which is where I am live streaming Starfield and also Star Citizen. When I play Star Citizen, I usually stream from 8:30 p.m. until 10:30 p.m. Central Time in America, or AM here in Asia. Thank you so much to Dr. Fabin, Zero Crusher, and Deplorable Infidel. I've been Erad, and I'll see you guys in the next one.